Well, we heard about two projects that are already running. This is an idea, it's still a proposal, because we presented the proposal at the last call of Horizon 2020 in the Social Challenge 6 for virtual museums, and the evaluation is ongoing now, so we don't know about the results. But we are convinced that there are elements that are worth to be shared with you. So we present it as a work in progress. It is not yet a project. We will go very quickly through a definition of virtual museums, because there are different concepts, and we want to tell you how we interpreted this concept and how the ICT, the technologies, can support the implementation of these ideas. Then Neil will tell you about an example of virtual museum that we proposed in the Virtual EU proposal to the European Commission. And if we have time, I can tell you a few words about why we choose photography as the main content for this virtual museum on the European dream of the 50s. I must say that the proposal was born as a follow-up of three projects that the community of partners have completed or are still completing. The first is Reaches, which is led by Neil, and it is a research project funded by the European Commission in FP7. The second is eSpace, which is run by Sara, and you know about it. It is about the creative reuse of digital cultural content, with the particular emphasis on the content available through Europeana. And the third is Civic Epistemologies, which was a small, very compact coordination action exploring the opportunities of citizen science in the digital cultural heritage research. And there is some material that is available upstairs about civic epistemologies. So in this project we tried to take the experiences and the results of these three, in this proposal, the results of these three projects, it is considered as a follow-up of our activity. So, first, the virtual museum is not a transposition of the museum online, and it is not just a repository of content to be accessed. These are different instruments that are necessary as a baseline to build the virtual museum, but the virtual museum is something else, is a new provider of information that of rich and complex and distributed information, which is based on repositories and museums' experiences. So we think that there are some key factors that must be taken into account while designing a virtual museum. The first is that there should be a novel access to the information. It is not just a search as we are used to do with the repositories. We need engagement of the users in the experience as we have when we are in the museums, but transported in the digital work. We have to have a contribution of different sources. Now the physical museums are suffering of being still too closed. The virtual museum should be born since the beginning as an open space where it is possible to experience content from different sources, but also to contribute with the content of the visitors, of the users in the virtual museum. As individuals or as groups, as associations, as municipalities, as contributors to the life of the virtual museum. It is a laboratory, so it is not something that is closed, fixed, and presented as a closed product, but it is something that evolves and changes and gives opportunities for experiments. And it must be an alternative experience, not a substitution to the visit to the physical museum. It is not that we think that a virtual museum is what will come after the physical museum. The physical museums will remain as physical museums, and the virtual museum is another experience. It is another thing that possibly encourages its users to go and to visit the physical museums. So we think that there are a certain number of functions that are necessary while building the virtual museum. Certainly there are the traditional functions of the museums, which is collection, selection, curation, contextualization, and presentation. So this is something that we need, and the ICT provide the instruments to do it in the digital world. But it should include presentation of curated exhibitions, so there is the concept of the exhibition still in the virtual museum. It should give access to content that are locked, not available, because they are not online, because they are closed in closed repositories, because they are not known. So this spirit of the virtual museum to open and to engage people in contributing is important in our mind. In a certain way, there is a contribution to the preservation, because giving access to digital copies means to preserve physical objects that are fragile and that cannot be seen by many people. And on the top of this, it has to have aesthetic and novel experiences. So the concept of the new experience is at the core of the virtual museum. In our opinion, it can have many impacts. The existence and the development of these kinds of virtual museums. Certainly a better opportunity to disseminate cultural heritage, mechanisms to enhance the networking of memory institutions. Memory institutions are still in the initial action to work together, to share. Yes, there is the sharing of objects to do physical exhibitions, but you know how difficult it is, how expensive, how dangerous. So sharing content and creating networked exhibitions in the digital work with the digital museum is something that can improve very much the capability of the memory institutions to work together. The possibility to discover content that are not known, a bigger and stronger engagement, in particular with the young generations who are not visiting physical museums massively, as instead we would like to have as a basis for the education of the new generations, and a way to recalibrate the relationship between cultural heritage and people and the citizens, because this is again another aspect that we have studied in Riches, which is preventing the society for taking all the benefits from the richest cultural heritage in the world as we have in Europe. And being Italian, I feel to be the advocate of exploiting cultural heritage much better than we do today. ICT is a basis, because without the ICT, the virtual museum does not exist. And certainly it should provide instruments for visualization and navigation, including the 3D visualization, the realization of virtual reality environments and augmented reality, immersive interactions, the use of wearable devices. This is all a part of the design of a virtual museum. But not only this, is also the storytelling, the stories that are beyond the objects, because the first error but probably more a mistake than an error, of Europeana is to give access to individual objects without any story. Now, little by little, they are recovering this weakness, but an enormous deposit of individual cultural heritage objects is nothing. Also from the museum's point of view. It is the warehouse, it is the basement of the museum where all the objects have a catalog number, but that is not the museum. So stories are very important, and again, the ICT can help in creating elements for stories that facilitate the creation of narratives. Certainly there is the need of a human intervention, but semantic links, mining of information from the description of the objects, all this can inspire the narrators to create stories. There is a strong role for infrastructures, and in this sense, I remember that 2 years ago I was at the Digital Echoes talking about digital infrastructure for cultural heritage. We are still needing digital infrastructures because without the infrastructures, this connectivity does not exist. We are connected thanks to the internet. But if we wanted to do something that is more than what we do on the internet, we need powerful infrastructures. These should provide scalable and safe storage, because there is a lot of content coming from different sources that should be stored safely. Management of distributed digital repositories. These digital repositories are all over the world, all over Europe, and they must be seen as a continuum of information. As a user, I cannot pass from an interface to another, wait time, because I'm moving from an object that is in a collection in the UK to an object that is in a collection in Italy. It should be seen as a continuum. The metadata processing is very important, because it is through enriching of metadata that we enable the added value services that I was mentioning before, and we enable powerful search features. We need computing power to elaborate 3D and virtual reality environments. There is a strong need of computing power, and this can be shared through the infrastructure instead of having big investments by memory institutions who have no money to do it. Advanced discovery services, certainly through image recognition, pattern matching. When we have a large amount of content, we need the ICT to help us in making searches. And last but not least, flexible and powerful authentication and authorization mechanisms. Because if we give a large amount of content in the hands of developers, users, museums, software developers, then we have to have a mechanism to control the access and possibly the damages to the digital content, because something is changed and there is not a trace of what happened, or somebody is accessing content that are not for free. And all this, when the numbers are big, must be done with the machine, so we need ICT to help us. We already said innovative interfaces, which means now virtual reality and augmented reality. We are experiencing some initial wording from virtual reality and augmented reality, but there is an enormous potential that in the coming years I'm convinced that will arrive. And to do this, we must be prepared to have ideas how to exploit this technological potential. And for this reason, we are thinking about a possible example of a virtual museum.
Thank you, Angela. Yeah, so as Angela's just said, it's obviously we're responding to this call, which is very fundamentally an ICT call, but you have to have some ideas, some concepts, and some approaches to the notion of cultural heritage, and the call was wide open in terms of what cultural heritage you would choose to look at, to stuff into your virtual museum. I say we, collectively, it's actually the idea came from the Belgian partner leading the proposal of this concept of the European dream, which is a kind of mirror image, in a way, of the American dream. This is not anything to do with the UK approach, but if David Cameron wants to come and talk to us about how we can boost his Stay In campaign, then we would be delighted to lend our support. Because of course what we're trying to do is to build this bridge between, it's sort of kind of intergenerational, as Antonella has mentioned. We want it to be relevant to people today, but also to resonate with through the generations. So if we look at this period, the post-war period, it does provide various opportunities. Whether you class this as a dream, I don't think that most of the nationalities that comprised Europe post-war were necessarily thinking in terms of a kind of, a sort of structure that we live with today, but nevertheless, clearly people were thinking about how to recover from the war, how to reconstruct lives and society. So it does provide that kind of great opportunity. We mentioned this kind of emancipatory movement, in a way, to link that period with the contemporary world. And photographs provide an ideal vehicle for that. And we could say a lot more about photographs and photography, but we rather think that it's lunchtime very soon, imminently. So we'll come on to that in a little while. So the dream of a better life in post-war Europe, 1950s. The opportunity of photographs then, for the digital virtual museum. Obviously, that's an image which we can, and a whole range and a collection of images that we can use, we can mobilise. It resonates in terms of memory. It opens the way to storytelling. Just to add into what Antonella was saying, I mean, I'm first and foremost a historian, so there are, of course, these questions related to around ICT and infrastructure and authenticity and accuracy and so on and so forth. From a historian's point of view, there's also the big question about how you moderate all of these stories for historical accuracy and to represent fairly the cultural heritage of that era. So photographs then around memory and identity, a potent way to facilitate cultural interaction. And not just then between generations, but if I come on to my last slide, the chair will be delighted to know. It opens then to according to the selection of your content, of your photographic content, various themes. I've mentioned regeneration, reconstruction, at all kinds of level that you might look at that. The recovery from war, peace and prosperity. We want to present a very positive message, and we hope that that will resonate in the current climate. Remember the mass migrations and how Europe recovered from mass migration and displaced peoples in the post-war world. Well, good heavens, we're living with that today as well. It also opens up the way for various societal changes, the role and status of women in society, the coming of consumer goods, how that positioned or didn't position women in the home or out of the home, the return to the home after war work. So lots and lots of opportunities there in terms of what photographs can can do for us in our virtual museum. And there you see a picture, top left, of Antonella on the back of a boyfriend's Vespa.
It's my mother.
That's Sarah's mother in front of the Beetle. My mother in front of the telly.
There's Neil in the basin.
Yeah, there's me in the local NHS. I mentioned welfareism, of course, this big era of welfareism in the post-war world as well. That's it.
Thank you, Neil. Perfect, brilliant.